Chapter 1. The Four-Legged Landlord. A pungent, rotting stench was the first thing to assault my senses. It was a sharp mixture of damp moss, dried blood, and raw ammonia. I tried to rub my nose, but something was wrong. My arm felt far too short, and my spine curved at an unnatural angle. Worse, the moss-covered floor of the cave was much too close to my face. I slowly opened my eyes. Pale blue light glowed from the cave walls, revealing two small, light brown, furry legs. Tiny claws pressed against the damp stone beneath me. Wait. I tried to curse, but the sound that escaped my throat betrayed every last shred of dignity I had as a grown man. Off. The sound was high-pitched, weak, pathetic. I stumbled backward and tripped over my own feet. That was when I realized I had four of them. I fell flat on my rear in front of a shallow puddle. Its calm surface reflected a brutal truth. Oversized ears, shaped almost like a bat's. Bulging eyes that looked as though they were trapped in a permanent existential crisis. A tiny, trembling snout. This was not just any dog. This was Biscuit, my boss's Chihuahua. My memories returned all at once, sending the world spinning around me. The Abyssal anomaly explosion. A blinding surge of energy had erupted without warning, leaving my entire body numb. Biscuit had been thrown through the air and dragged toward a gate that looked like a localized black hole. Unfortunately, the noisy little dog's leash had still been wrapped tightly around my wrist. When the anomaly pulled Biscuit's body inside, an overwhelming surge of energy slammed into my arm. The pain felt as though something was tearing my soul out of my body. Then my vision went black. I remembered nothing after that. A translucent blue panel suddenly appeared before my eyes. System warning. Reboot complete. Connection to Earth server failed. Fatal error. Original vessel disconnected. Earth hunter parameters invalid. Laws of a foreign dimension detected. Warning. Abyssal anomaly is infiltrating the user's soul. Rewriting system root. Assimilating abyssal energy. Synchronizing soul with the nearest biological host. Synchronization successful. Species, Canis lupus familiaris. Chihuahua mutation. I stared at the floating screen. Damn system. So only my soul had been dragged through the anomaly, and now I was trapped inside this dog? Another panel appeared. Status window. Name, Luke. Current host, Biscuit. Level, 1. Physical condition, healthy. Mana, 50 out of 50. Race, Abyssal Chihuahua. Strength, 1. Agility, 6. Stamina, 2. Intelligence, 12. Current status, highly vulnerable. Easily stepped on. Easily stepped on? In my previous life, I had been a hunter. Sure, I was only ranky, but seeing my strength reduced to a miserable one stabbed directly at my pride. At least my mind was still intact. Before I could curse the floating screen any further, something scraped against the stone inside the dark tunnel ahead. A wet cough followed, then another dragging step. My canine sense of smell caught an incredibly dense stench. Something was coming. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was emaciated, with a severely hunched spine. Its green skin was covered in deep wrinkles, scabs, and old scars. A goblin. But this was not a fierce goblin warrior. It was ancient. The creature coughed violently as it walked, leaning heavily on a rotting femur bone that it used as a cane. Goblins were never alone. That was basic hunter knowledge. But the old creature in front of me was crippled, scarred, and half-blind. It was clearly an outcast. An elder discarded by its own pack and abandoned in this cave to rot. Its remaining yellow eye locked onto me. The goblin released a harsh grunt. Its snout twitched as it caught my scent, and thick saliva dripped from its jaw onto the moss-covered stone. There was no intelligence in its expression, only hunger. To the goblin, I was nothing more than a small, furry meal that had wandered into its lair. It raised a dull, jagged bone knife with one trembling hand. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run. Before I could turn, the goblin swung the blade. I tried to leap out of the way, forgetting that my legs were now barely longer than a human finger. The bone blade sliced across my hip. Agonizing pain burned through my nerves. The impact threw me backward. I rolled across the slippery moss and slammed hard into the cave wall. The air burst from my lungs. Before I could even attempt to stand, a rough, bony hand closed around my neck. The goblin lifted me into the air. I thrashed wildly, unable to breathe. Its grip tightened around my throat while the knife in its other hand rose toward my stomach. It was going to gut me. No, I refused to die like this. I refused to die a pathetic death, as a dog. Panic overwhelmed me. I struggled with everything I had, swinging my tiny front paws at the goblin's face. One of my claws struck something soft. By pure luck, it pierced directly into the goblin's remaining yellow eye. The creature released a hoarse shriek. Its hand opened, dropping me onto the stone floor. Blinded and overwhelmed by pain, the goblin stumbled backward while clutching its face. Its foot landed on a patch of slick moss. It slipped. The goblin fell backward, and the rear of its skull struck the stone floor with a sickening crack. It lay there, dazed. I had almost no strength left. Blood dripped steadily from the wound on my hip, and every breath sent pain through my throat. But this was my only chance. I lunged forward and sank my teeth into the goblin's wrinkled neck. The taste of bitter blood flooded my mouth. I locked my jaw and refused to let go. The goblin thrashed beneath me. Its fists struck my body again and again, but I held on until something inside its neck finally tore. Hot green blood poured across the stone. The goblin's movements weakened. Then its body became still. I released my bite and staggered backward, panting heavily. Shitty luck. A goblin lay dead in front of me. Killed by me. A notification appeared. Target neutralized. Goblin Elder. Level 9. I stared at the corpse. Then another thought entered my mind. If my soul was here, what had happened to my original body? Had it been pulverized by the anomaly? Had it been swallowed by the gate? Was there even anything left? Pain began to throb behind my eyes. I shook my tiny head, trying to force away the panic creeping through my thoughts. There was no point thinking about it right now. My current priority was simple. Survive. A new notification panel materialized in front of me. Unique skill unlocked. Abyssal Parasite. Rank unknown. Abyssal Parasite allows the user to plant a seed of consciousness inside the corpse of a recently deceased creature. The corpse will rise again as a vassal. I silently read the glowing blue text. Back on Earth, hunters with necromancy or puppetry classes were considered part of the absolute elite. They were almost guaranteed lives filled with wealth, influence, and luxury. Hey, inside this underground hellhole, wealth was the last thing on my mind. But at least this ability might prevent me from becoming monster feces before the night was over. I crawled toward the goblin's still-warm corpse. Thick green blood stained the light brown fur around my mouth and chest. There was only one way to find out whether the skill worked. Arise. I spoke the command silently inside my mind and focused my intention on the corpse. A foreign, freezing sensation emerged from somewhere deep inside my chest. It flowed down through my body and into my front paws. Dark purple energy seeped from the pads of my feet. It glowed faintly, resembling a mass of toxic shadows slowly melting across the stone. The energy swept over the moss, slithered toward the goblin, and entered through the open wound in its neck. The moment the last trace of energy disappeared into the corpse, my body jerked backward. Something connected to my mind. A link had been created. It did not feel as though I was controlling the creature through brute force. It was deeper than that. An absolute dominance had been embedded directly into its consciousness. The goblin's fingers twitched. Its joints popped one after another. Then the vassal moved. It pushed itself upright and slowly stood. Its movements were not stiff or unnatural. Its shoulders remained slightly hunched, exactly as they had been when it was alive. Without waiting for a command, the goblin bent down and retrieved its bone knife from the cave floor. Then it looked at me. Its gaze briefly shifted toward the dark tunnel surrounding us, as though assessing the area for danger. A moment later, its attention returned to me. It stood silently, waiting. Another panel appeared. Host number 1 successfully bound. Species, Goblin Elder. Vessel integrity, critical. Warning. If vessel integrity is completely destroyed, the host will perish permanently. A quiet snort escaped my canine snout. The fatal wound in the goblin's neck meant the corpse had already been badly damaged before I raised it. But it would have to do. My body suddenly shivered as the cold air of the cave passed through my blood-stained fur. My stomach growled loudly. A violent throb struck my head, and my vision swayed. The skill had drained something from inside me, leaving behind a hollow, freezing sensation in my chest. The thick smell of blood now filled the cave. Sooner or later, it would attract other predators. I took one cautious step toward the darkness of the tunnel. The old goblin responded immediately. It moved to my side, gripping its bone knife while its eyes searched every shadow ahead of us. This place was not safe. Not yet. It was time to move. Chapter 2. The Law of Echoes. My stomach twisted violently. For a body that weighed barely 5 pounds, the pain was almost unbearable. This was not an ordinary rumble of hunger. It was a primitive demand from my new body. Eat or die. My head was still throbbing from the mana I had spent raising my first vassal. Every time my magical energy ran low, it felt as though my human consciousness was pressing against the inside of this tiny Chihuahua skull. I looked at the old goblin beside me. It stood perfectly still, its shoulders slightly hunched and its bone knife gripped tightly in one hand. Its mind was bound to mine, but I could still sense the remains of its predatory instincts. Its gaze moved constantly, searching every shadow along the cave tunnel with a vigilance that ordinary undead would never possess. My oversized ears suddenly twitched. A faint crunching sound came from a pile of bones in the corner ahead. Something was feeding. A sharp, fishy odor struck my nose. It was not the same rotten stench that clung to the goblin. This smelled of wet fur, dote, and fresh meat. A rat. No. It was a giant cave rat, nearly the size of a fully grown house cat. Its fur was coarse and black, while its red eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. This was much more reasonable prey than a diseased level 9 goblin. The thought of eating raw meat disgusted the human part of my mind, but my Chihuahua stomach reacted differently. It tightened with hunger, urging me to pounce. Unfortunately, my strength was still only 1. Charging the creature myself would be suicide. Through the invisible connection inside my mind, I sent a single, absolute command. Attack. The goblin lunged forward. The cave rat reacted instantly. The fur along its spine rose, and it leaped with surprising speed, aiming directly for the arm holding the goblin's knife. Its jaws closed around the goblin's wrist. Bone crunched between its teeth. Had the goblin still been alive, it would have screamed and dropped its weapon. But a vassal felt no pain. Destroyed flesh meant nothing to it. Without hesitation, the goblin swung its bitten arm, using the rat's hanging body as extra weight. It smashed the creature against the stone floor. The impact echoed through the cave. The rat's jaws loosened. The goblin's free hand immediately closed around its neck and pinned it against the ground. A moment later, the dull bone knife stabbed repeatedly into its black back. The cave rat released several high-pitched squeals. Then it fell silent. Fresh blood spread across the moss-covered stone. A notification appeared. Target neutralized. Cave rat. Level 2. I stared at the corpse, then looked toward the old goblin. I had killed a level 9 goblin and defeated a level 2 cave rat, yet my status had not changed at all. If killing monsters did not automatically grant experience, how was I supposed to increase my level? I summoned the system screen and examined every line more carefully. Near the bottom was a note I had missed earlier while panicking. The user may extract the life essence of a defeated target. I approached the cave rat's corpse and pressed one front paw against the wound in its back. Absorb. Dark purple tendrils emerged from my paw. They sank into the dead rat's flesh and pulled out a cluster of pale, glowing energy. The essence flowed toward me and disappeared through the skin beneath my fur. Warmth immediately spread throughout my body. At the same time, a pulse traveled through the mental connection between me and the goblin. The torn flesh around my vassal's wrist slowly began to close. Several notifications appeared in succession. Cave rat essence assimilated. Level 2 reached. Maximum mana increased from 50 to 60. Random attribute increased. Agility increased by 1. 1 free attribute point acquired. The status window opened. Name, Luke. Current host, Biscuit. Level, 2. Vassal slots, 1 out of 2. Strength, 1. Stamina, 2. Agility, 7. Intelligence, 12. Free attribute points, 1. A strange sensation washed over me. The hollow coldness inside my chest disappeared as my mana refilled, and the pressure inside my skull eased. At the same time, my consciousness seemed to expand. There was now an empty space inside the connection. A second vassal slot. This was it. I immediately turned toward the cave rat's corpse. Arise. Nothing happened. Instead, the system panel flashed red. Error. Invalid vessel. The target's essence has been depleted. I released an irritated snort. Damn it. A corpse that had been drained of its essence could no longer be raised as a vassal. Before I could think about it further, claws scraped rapidly against the stone above us. My ears snapped upward. 2 cave rats emerged from a dark crevice in the ceiling and dropped into the tunnel. The smell of fresh blood had drawn them here. Both creatures attacked almost simultaneously. The old goblin stepped forward on instinct, placing itself between me and the incoming monsters. But with 1 damaged arm, it could not match the speed of 2 enemies at once. The first rat sank its teeth into the goblin's thigh. The second tore its claws across the vassal's wrinkled chest. I had to intervene. But I could not rely on this useless canine body. I sent another command through the link. Ignore your defense. Kill the one on the right. The goblin obeyed without the slightest hesitation. It completely ignored the rat tearing into its left thigh. Instead, it seized the creature on its right with both hands. The goblin threw itself forward and slammed the rat's head against the cave wall. Once. Twice. A loud crack echoed through the tunnel. The rat's skull split, and its body stopped struggling. Target neutralized. Cave rat. Level 3. But the victory came at a heavy cost. The other cave rat had torn away most of the muscle from the goblin's thigh, exposing the bone beneath. Unable to support its own weight, my first vassal collapsed onto 1 knee. This was my chance. I acted before fear could slow me down. My eyes locked onto the newly killed rat. Arise. The mana that had just refilled was immediately pulled from my body. Dark purple energy shot from my paw and entered the dead rat through the wound in its skull. Host number 2 successfully bound. The cave rat's corpse jerked violently. Its red eyes opened again, now filled with a faint, dark purple glow. I issued my command immediately. Attack. The surviving enemy rat was preparing to leap at the kneeling goblin's throat. It never noticed the threat behind it. My new cave rat vassal pounced onto its back and sank its fangs deep into the base of its neck. The creature squealed in panic and thrashed wildly, trying to throw off its former companion. At the same moment, the old goblin gathered what little strength remained in its damaged body. It thrust the bone knife into the rat's stomach. The creature's movements slowed, then stopped. Silence returned to the cave. In front of me, both of my vassals became still and waited for another command. The goblin remained on 1 knee, its ruined leg barely holding together. The cave rat stood beside it, blood dripping from its jaws. My stomach twisted painfully once more. I stared at the final corpse. Absorb. The remaining essence flowed into my body. I waited. No notification appeared. The essence had been accepted, but it was not enough to increase my level. I would need stronger prey than ordinary cave rats from now on. The corpse had lost its essence, but the meat remained. The human part of my mind recoiled in disgust. My survival instincts roared much louder. Slowly, I lowered my snout toward the dead rat. I tore into the flesh around its neck and began to chew. Fishy blood soaked the fur around my muzzle. The taste was horrific, but my canine body reacted as though it had been given a feast. I looked down at my tiny paws, now filthy and stained with blood. I should have wanted to vomit. Instead, I felt a faint sense of satisfaction. The animal instincts inside this body were beginning to influence me. To hell with morality. In this pit of darkness, only fangs did the talking.